Hello and welcome to the third Wisden Cricket Daily podcast from the second India-England test in Vizag. I'm Rana, and with me today is Joe Harman. A quick recap first for all the late risers in the UK. Jimmy Anderson got England off to the perfect start, bowling Rohit Sharma with an absolute peach to knock over his off stump with his first over of the day, and then dismissed a double centurion from the first innings Jaiswal shortly after, nicking him off to Joe Root in the cordon. England so nearly dismissed Shubman Gill early on. Gill went on to score 100, but Gill was given out LBW off Hartley early on. He reviewed it out of hope more than anything, and replays showed that he edged it without realising it. There's also a marginal LBW that was millimetres away from being overturned, and an edge that went straight to first slip, only for Joe Root to be standing at second slip. Stokes set aggressive fields, allowing run-scoring opportunities that Iyer, and in particular Gill, made the most of. The home side once more looked threatening. They looked like they were going to build an insurmountable lead, only for Ahmed and Hartley to strike just before lunch. Hartley got Iyer through an outstanding catch from Stokes, who covered 22 metres before taking a diving catch over his shoulder, and Patidar fell for 9 thanks to a brilliant low catch from Ben Foakes. 4 wickets in the session for England, but Gill was looking good and the lead was approaching 300.
Yeah, the first hour after the lunch break belonged to India and Shubman Gill. India's under fire number 3 moved through the gears, hitting Rana Ahmed for a 6 and 2 fours in the space of 3 deliveries, as he seized control of the match, easing his way to a third Test 100 and his first for almost a year. England spinners kept plugging away though, never letting the run rate get out of control, and seemingly out of nowhere, Shoaib Bashir finally got the breakthrough when Gill's attempted reverse sweep flicked off his glove and was taken by Ben Foakes, DRS overturning the original not-out decision. Axar Patel followed 4 overs later when he was trapped LBW by a skiddy delivery from Tom Hartley, which scuttled along the floor. Umpire Gaffney turned down England's appeals, but DRS again intervened to send Patel on his way, dismissed for 45 to leave India 220 for 6 and the lead at 363. Batting cautiously, they had extended their lead to 370 by the tea break, but England's perseverance and Ben Stokes' relentless optimism had kept the dreamers dreaming.
Yep, and England had more to celebrate just after the tea break as well. Ahmed struck straight after the break with Barrett tamely pulling a long hop to mid-on before Kuldeep skied one off Hartley. Ashwin was dropped by Crawley at slip on 4 and was able to provide some resistance. But in a partnership that took quite a long time with Bumrah, he put on 26 for the 9th wicket, all the runs coming off Ashwin's bat before both fell in consecutive overs with the lead on 398. England were left needing 399 to win, with 14 overs left in the day, potentially a very tricky period, but they finished it on 67 for 1, with Duckett the only wicket to fall for 28 late in the day, defending again to Ashwin. Rehan Ahmed came out to bat at number 3, and he finished the day on 9 not out off 8 balls. Joe, like in Hyderabad, an outstanding day for England on day 3 to just about give themselves a chance going into day 4.
Does it? Are we really saying that? I guess we are these days, but it's probably the greatest testament to what Ben Stokes has done with this England side yet that so many people still believe that this Test match is alive. I think England's highest successful chase in India prior to this game is 208, is it? I think.
Yeah, in Delhi 50 years ago.
Yeah. No one has ever made 400 in a successful 4th innings run chase in India. And yet it still feels like England aren't completely out of this game. It's amazing what Ben Stokes has done for the game, that we are all sensible people are saying that England can potentially chase down this target against an Indian attack featuring Bumrah and Ashwin on a admittedly 4th day rather than 5th day pitch, but they've got one hell of a job ahead of them and they're going to do it.
Yeah, and it's not just mugs like us that think England have a chance. Shubman Gill at the end of play, just after scoring 100, he's asked after play, what do you make of India's chances? And he says it's 70-30 India. I think even the most optimistic England fan will have England's chances at lower than 30%. And it's quite interesting he said that, because Alistair Cook in the TNT studio today made a couple of times made the point that what England do makes the other team do weird things and sometimes play in quite a fearful way. And almost just saying that suggests a level of fearfulness that must help England. At the very end of the day, Zach Crawley was even Zach Crawley was basically playing out the spinners at the very end of the day, and there's basically no one around the bat when he was just looking to survive. India almost are playing into it with a similar view of how it's going as well.
Yeah, and I think whether England can pull this off or not, I think this fourth innings is crucial for that exact reason, because if England can even get to 350, I think Ben Stokes will be able to present this in the way that he does, almost as a win, and his players will believe him in that, and it will spook India for the rest of the series. It's a 5-test series, a lot of cricket to be played, and England are getting a lot of wins, some matchups along the way that are really crucial to keep dominating. The fact that Ashwin is averaging nearly 40 with the ball across the series now. I know he got the breakthrough this evening, but that's a massive win. So if England can, even if they can't win it, but they can get reasonably close, I think that's really, really important. As the game stands, England could still potentially lose by 250 runs. India could wipe the floor with them tomorrow, and then the series has quite a different feel to it. But if England can get close, and who knows, even creep over the line, then India will be thinking, what we have to do so much to beat this England side. It's not the normal parameters of Test cricket that we're dealing with.
There is some uneven bounce, but for England to restrict India to 255 with Leach missing Root off the field for the vast majority of the day, and a 41-year-old Anderson who looked pretty sore after that initial spell, for so much of the work to be done by those three spinners who had 3 test caps between them going to this test is sort of extraordinary. And we were saying before we started recording, I'm not entirely sure how it happened, because they bowled well. I don't think they bowled incredibly well.
No, and they brought a pitch map up halfway through that session, which suggested England spinners weren't really finding the consistent length that you need to prize out wickets in India. I still think England deserve a lot of credit, particularly given that inexperienced attack. But I think India is still playing this slightly strangely. They sort of get stuck, but seem to then get out playing big shots as though they've panicked. There are a lot of players who aren't looking in great nick. Even Rohit, who has looked in quite good nick, hasn't got a big score. Shreyas Iyer's under pressure. I saw he's averaging 17 in Test cricket since the start of 2023. So with Kohli potentially coming back for the third Test, he's playing for his place. Bharat is keeping beautifully, but struggling with the bat. Bharat for Pant is Kohli is a massive loss, but Bharat for Pant transforms this Indian side in a negative sense when it comes to their batting lineup and what they can do with that lower order. So yeah, I think India will think, could we have done a bit more to put pressure on that inexperienced, particularly in that second session where they only lost 2 wickets, but they didn't go along at a rate that they could have done, I think, and missed out on a few loose deliveries and kept England just about in the game.
Yeah, I know that Kuldeep Yadav is no one's expecting him to score runs, but I thought his wicket almost summed up India's difficulty in attacking. There's a bit when Ashwin came, I think the ball before he got out, he defended it. Then Ashwin comes down, has a word, and Shastri said on commentary that him lip reading that was something along the lines of have a go. Next ball, right. Kuldeep has a go and is out. And I think obviously England play an attacking brand of cricket, but I think there is a method there. It's not totally premeditated. They know what they're trying to hit. Whereas with India, sometimes it's almost like it's just a decision that doesn't take into consideration what the actual ball is that is sent down towards them. And I also thought, it was one hell of a collapse, 211 for 4 to 255 all out. Gill was looking really good at that point. And the wicket of Gill I thought was quite interesting as well, because it was one of those moments where Stokes just does something weird in the field to try and create something out of nothing. So I think he had 6 men on the leg side to Bashir. Gill, who's brilliant down the ground, doesn't really sweep or reverse sweep that much. Tries to play a reverse sweep because that's where the gap in the field was on the offside. And then he's out, and that's a wicket from nowhere, and England have an opening. This happens quite a lot with England, where they are miles behind in games, and then just a weird... The opposition feels like they're going nowhere, and they're not quite sure what to do in response to what England are doing. And suddenly England are back in it, even if they are still, outsiders at this stage.
Yeah, and as I said in my little roundup of session 2, it's that relentless optimism. It must be very hard to play against when you've essentially beaten a side, but they don't believe they're beaten. And then you have to kind of beat them again. And we saw that in the first test where England came back when they had absolutely no right to do so. This is an even bigger challenge they've got ahead of them. But still, India will think, how do we shake them off? How do we actually finish them off? And I think there is a timidity sometimes to India's play, which is being exaggerated by what England are doing. I think we saw that at times during the Ashes, where Australia looked quite negative, not necessarily because they were playing negative Test cricket as we used to understand it, but just in comparison to what England are doing and trying and being full of ideas. And I think India looked a little bit, I know they got the 1 wicket, but I thought that was an oddly timid mini session from India's bowlers there, and Rohit in particular as captain. Astonishing, really, that it took 11 overs for Ashwin to come into the attack. If you think of that old cliche, who would England least like to be facing at that point? Surely it would have been Bumrah and Ashwin. And yeah, 10 overs ticked by before Ashwin comes into the attack, and sure enough, he gets Duckett in his first over.
Yeah. A word on how England's spinners bowled. Rahan has taken 6 wickets in the match. 5 of those are top 7 batters. The economy rate was under 4s, which is good going for a wrist spinner. Hartley once more did a job in the second innings, 4 wickets for him, and Bashir actually did a handy job as well, having been expensive last night.
Yeah, I think they're visibly growing in confidence. It's great fun watching Rian Ahmed. He bowls some loose deliveries, but actually for a leg spinner of his age, I think he's a pretty tight bowler. I think the amount of one-day white ball cricket he'll have played will have helped him in that regard. I mean, if you just you can't bowl brilliant balls and then loose balls, because in one-day cricket you'll just go for too many runs. He's actually quite a tight leg spinner. I mean, he could become such a good player. I mean, if you think how much his leg break has advanced over the last 6 months or so, and he's still got that massive googly, bowled a beautiful one today, which actually was spinning so much it was missing leg stump when Stokes went for DRS. I think it's hugely encouraging, and that's the biggest shock to me so far, that England spinners have been able to hold their own. I mean, statistically, they are matching India's, if not bettering them in a couple of cases, and I think that's hugely impressive. And again, speaks of Stokes's captaincy and positivity and belief that he's able to get through to his players.
There'll be some Indian viewers watching or listening to this, no doubt, who will be confused as to why we're being so negative about a team that's in the ascendancy in the game. They're doing very well. They're still very much on top. But I think, right, the difference between the two spin attacks, especially for conditions, Sourav Ganguly tweeted yesterday that India should be producing more wickets like this. It's another very good cricket wicket where all types of bowling, all types of batters really can thrive on it. It gives everyone a chance, which is what you want to see. And in theory, this is the sort of pitch where you should really see the difference in quality between Ashwin, Kuldeep, Axar, and England's guys who've barely played a test match between them. For England spinners to, still be in the game, especially with Root not being able to bowl for most of the day.
That's important to mention as well, actually, because Root is almost a frontline bowler in this side. So to not have him pretty much throughout the day, and to still be able to get India out, they bowled them out for 230 today when you take off the runs yesterday, or something like that. Is hugely impressive effort.
Yeah, and also I don't think you can overstate how important that Anderson spell was up top. Yeah. I think Rohit and Jaiswal in particular basically stopped Hartley from bowling for large periods of the first innings because of just how quickly he was scoring against him. So to get rid of him allowed Hartley to bowl a lot of overs today, and you saw the more he bowls, the more he got into a rhythm, and not only just finding his accuracy, but I feel like in the second innings at Hyderabad, varied his pace as well, and just looked like a more confident bowler. What did you make of Gill's knock? He was under a lot of pressure coming into it. Survived a few hairy moments early on, but he was the only India player to make his start count.
Yeah, scratchy start, as you said in your little roundup. He rode his luck a little bit at the start of the day, but then when he gets going, you think, how was he not scoring runs? Because he just looks such a good player, and as balanced as we try to be, I think it's probably fair to admit that we would like to see England win in India. I don't think that's hugely controversial to say, but Shubman is one of those players that you watch, and whoever you support, you want to see him bat, and he's just such a good player to watch. I saw Peterson tweeting yesterday, he's such a good player, don't go on the average, go on the talent, and I think that's absolutely the case with Shubman. I don't know if he was really under threat in the way, he was the player people were talking about, but I don't know if he really was quite as under threat as was being made out. I suppose if Kohli and Rahul came back into the side, then maybe he'd have missed out. But I think he'd have probably still just about clung on to his place. Come the end of his Test career, I have no doubt that Shubman Gill is going to be averaging 50. This is a bit of a blip of a start with some still standout moments in there. He's still figuring out his game, particularly against the quicks. But he's one hell of a player, and we'll be scoring a few more tons against England over the next decade, I reckon.
Well, that's it for part 1. In part 2, we'll talk more about England's chances going in to day 4. Andrew asks, what's the highest fourth innings winning total in India? I know it's Bazball and all that, but do England have a prayer? So this would be the highest successful run chase in India. It would also be England's highest ever successful run chase and the 5th highest ever overall. But I would say if England fans are looking for a bit of hope, I always think run chase stats are a bit misleading, especially with England, because first of all, for a big fourth innings run chase, you need an odd sequence of events. You need a pitch that's good, but that you also need enough time left in the game. And with England, they're aggressive in both disciplines, so the game is almost on fast forward at times. So there's almost always time for some sort of last innings craziness. They also bat, if you look at their successful chases under Stokes, they have more often than not come on days 4 rather than 5. And here they are batting on a day 4 pitch if they're going to win the game. And the game will finish tomorrow one way or the other. New Zealand at Headingley against India at Edgbaston, against Australia at Headingley. The bulk of those chases were on day 4 rather than day 5. So that's why this side is better placed than pretty much anywhere else to make significant fourth innings scores. And
even aside from Bazball and what Ben Stokes has done with England, targets were being chased that appeared inconceivable in the last 5-10 years anyway. This is not just a Bazball phenomenon. Those records, they're interesting, and we're talking about them now and they're interesting to delve into, but they're not hugely relevant really. And like you said, it's not just the fact that England are scoring quicker in the fourth innings. It's the fact that they're scoring quicker in their first innings, which allows them to take these opportunities on a 4th day pitch rather than 5th day pitch, which is a whole different. Well, it's not a whole different ball game. It's the same ball game, but it's a ball game on an easier pitch.
Yeah, and also, if you're looking for more hope, I'd say that not every pitch in India is the same. Not every pitch will break up like the Hyderabad one did. This one might. We don't know, but the highest successful chase in India is India scoring 387 for 4 against England at Chennai in 2008. I was looking the score card earlier today. So Sehwag hit 83 off 60, and you've got man of the match despite getting a failure in the first innings and being the 3rd highest run scorer in the run chase. Sachin scored 100, Yuvraj scored 85 not out. So it is possible. Not all pitches will disintegrate as Hyderabad did.
I was there for that one. That was my first Test match overseas as a reporter. India could have got about 600 in that 4th innings. That England didn't look like taking wickets after, and that was interesting actually, because that was entirely set up the previous day by Sehwag's 80 odd, which got him the man of the match award, as you said. That's what made it possible, and that was Sehwag was playing Bazball, 15 years before we'd heard of it. And made things possible that otherwise wouldn't have been. And that's what we're seeing now with this England side.
Do you remember what was the chat around the pitch like at the time? Were people sort of surprised that it didn't really, there weren't too many demons on it towards the end of the game?
It was a flat pitch throughout. Every time a wicket fell, it came as a surprise. That was Graham Swan's debut where he got Gambhir and Dravid in his first over as well. But yeah, I think Strauss got a century in each innings as well. So it wasn't that there were any demons in the pitch. It was just that no one had ever got that score before, so it didn't seem possible. And I think maybe that's not dissimilar to what we're seeing now. The significance of 400 is quite amusing as well, as though everyone kept talking about, well, when India gets a lead of 400, England are going to be in trouble then, as though 399 feels somehow achievable, but that extra single is just completely takes it out of reach. So 399, game on.
Rehan Ahmed came out to bat at 3. Why? I couldn't really work out, and I don't think the commentators could either. Ravi Sastry was saying it must be something to do with Root, and I was like, yeah, but again, why? Root backed at 4.
Yeah, Shastri started that and then sort of lost his train of thought and, and sort of didn't really follow through with it. Yeah, I is why even there are strategies and there are also some things which are just for impact, and this felt like perhaps slightly more of the latter. There is definitely the benefit of, and I've always thought a night watchman who can play some shots the next day makes much more sense to me than someone who just blocks out the last 2 overs and then is just a sitting duck the next day. So I can absolutely see tomorrow morning Rana would come out and play aggressively in a way that Ollie Pope probably wouldn't have played at the start of his innings. And if he gets a quick 30, then that target starts to be chipped away at. Equally, if he goes in the first over tomorrow, Bumrah cleans him up with an unplayable delivery, it matters less that it was him than if it had been Ollie Pope. So there's some logic there. And also, perhaps more than anything, it's just quite fun. And I think that would have definitely been part of Stokes' decision-making process as well. It's just fun.
Yeah, and worth saying on Bumrah as well, by the way, because of when the end of the Indian innings fell, it means that Bumrah can bowl a pretty hefty chunk of the first 30 overs of the innings. He's only taken out the attack very late on day 3, and you'd expect him to open the bowling again on day 4. So England did very well not to lose a wicket to Bumrah this evening, but they've got to go again tomorrow morning, no doubt.
But that's another thing. We're talking about this target as though it's a realistic thing. It's like we've forgotten how Bumrah bowled in the first innings. If he bowls like that again, I mean, England aren't going to get to 250, let alone 400. I mean, that was just sensational bowling. And the thing with Bumrah is, I mean, that was him at his exceptional best, but he doesn't slip far beneath that. Like, he is so consistent. I think, I mean, Bumrah will be brilliant. It's just what happens at the other end and whether England can get enough of a grip in the game. And how they play Ashwin, I think, will be fascinating. He obviously wasn't at his best in the first innings. Duckett will be, I think, livid with himself for getting out, playing defensively to a spinner for the 3rd time in 4th innings when he was playing so nicely. And not that the ball was there to be hit necessarily in normal terms, but that is the way that Duckett plays. And he says himself that playing defensively is his weakness. And I think that's why he was so annoyed walking off the pitch there, that he's got, between 20 and 47, 4 times in a row, looked in great nick, and 3 of those dismissals have been playing defensively against the spinner, which isn't really his game.
Well, Gill's got it at 70-30 India. How do you see it? Because I was thinking about it myself, and I think maybe 15% chance England, and that, if based on history, is still way higher than it probably should be. I guess the one thing in England's favour is just how quickly the game sometimes moves with them when they're out batting. England are 1 session away from needing 180 to win the Test match. They can lose 2 wickets in that opening session, score 150 runs, which isn't that abnormal for them, and then suddenly you really will feel the tension in that home crowd.
Yeah, I was going to go 10%. I'm going to go slightly beneath your 15. Other key factors: Joe Root's fitness. He hurt his finger today, spent a lot of time off the pitch. How serious is that? Are England just protecting him, or is there something more that they don't necessarily want India to know at this stage? That's just conjecture, but obviously he would have been very useful to bowl. So we've got to assume that there was, at least a moderately serious injury. And the size of the target, 400. Like, if it's even 300, you can potentially just race along. 400, you're going to need someone to play innings of proper substance. And it feels a big ask for Ollie Pope to play another one, having played one of the all-time great knocks in the previous Test. And Joe Root, I still think, is England's best chance of winning this match. So his fitness is going to be quite clearly absolutely key.
Well, so we're saying between 10 to 15% chance for England. We'll almost certainly know the result by this time tomorrow. Cheers for listening. Cheers, Joe. Catch you all tomorrow.